On behalf of the mayor, thank you very much for being here tonight. I'd like to thank our panel for being here as well. Imagine Boston 2030 is a comprehensive plan. It's the city's first plan since 1965, so it was about time we did a new one. It covers all aspects of how local government can best serve a changing city. Creating housing for a growing population and making that housing affordable, preparing for extreme weather patterns, growing job opportunities, supporting our waterfront and park system, identifying the transportation needs of the 21st century city, and most importantly, perhaps, ensuring equity. The plans have been formed by more than 14,000 Boston residents, hundreds of policy experts, hundreds of community organizations, hundreds of city employees, and it's all been shepherded by a dedicated staff of 2 in City Hall. Rebecca Emanuel and Natalia are today, both of whom are here tonight, so good work to those 2. And why are we doing these conversations? As we get ready to release the final draft for public comment, which happens next week, we wanted to engage the public one more time and think about some of the sectors that most impact the development of the city. So we often hear about eds and meds. Tonight we're going to talk about the eds. So with that, I'd like to introduce our moderator for this evening, Alex Krieger. Alex has been a faculty member at Harvard's Graduate School of Design for 40 years, almost as old as the last plan we did. At Harvard, Alex has served as the chairman of GSD's Urban Planning Department, associate chairman of GSD's Architecture Department, and taught undergraduates about the evolution of American cities. He is a principal at architecture firm NBPJ. He served as an advisor to many mayors and their planning staffs, including ours. And when Harvard began its expansion into Allston, Alex served as senior advisor to the planning process. In 2012, President Obama appointed Alex to serve on the U.S. Commission on Fine Arts. So we're in the right hands tonight. Please welcome Alex Krieger.
I'm not sure why I was given the honorary walk across in front of all of you. Well, so thank you all for being here. In a minute, I will introduce the distinguished panel, but it's kind of appropriate for this session to be at the BPL, it seems, especially given that it's really the world's oldest public, free-to-all institutions library, and of course that free-to-all is etched in stone on the front door of the facility. It's always very wonderful to walk through that front door and see that sign above. So let me introduce, and I will introduce you very briefly, and I apologize for this, but I think we all know that once you become president, you must have had some distinguished CV behind you beforehand. So in order of alphabetical order, because I guess that makes some sense, Dr. Robert Brown, the president of Boston University, actually since 1905, and an engineer by training. We have 2 engineers, I think. And prior to taking on the presidency of BU, the provost at MIT. Dr. Pam Ettinger, president of Bunker Hill Community College for a few years, right? And prior to that, the president of Moore Park College in California, and a vice president at Mass Bay Community College in Wellesley. Dr. Valerie Robertson, who joined us from Chicago, so I appreciate that because that's my hometown, the president of Roxbury Community College, and prior to that was the president of Olive Harvey College in Chicago, one of the City College campuses in Chicago. And I may mispronounce your name. I apologize in advance, right? Dr. Zorita Pentis. Zorita Pentis. The president of Wentworth Institute of Technology. And Dr. Pentis has the distinction of being the first female engineer to lead a higher education institution of technology in the United States. So that itself deserves a round of applause, I think. And last but hardly least, Dr. Lee Pelton, the president of Emerson College. And you've been there since 2011, I think, right? but prior came here from serving as the president of Willamette University in Oregon for 13 years, and prior to that you were dean at Colgate, dean of the college, and at Dartmouth. Yeah. So, what I'd like to do is ask a general question of all of these folks, and then follow that up with a specific question for each, and then hopefully we'll break out into a spontaneous discussion and eventually involve all of you in the audience as well. All right. So, universities in the city of Boston, 54 inside of 128, and 80 or 81 or 82 within 25-mile circle of where we sit right now. That's incredible. Right? The 5OU are responsible for educating 52,000 students, which is about a third of the number of college and university students in the Boston area, and there are upwards of 300,000, again, within that 25-mile radius of where we sit. It's kind of extraordinary, right? And you're also part, as Joyce said, part of something called the Eds and Meds economy, very important to Boston today. And if I were to ask anyone in the audience, what percentage of workers in Boston serve the Eds and Meds economy, I bet none of you would get it right. It's somewhere between 27 and 29%. Think about that. That's almost a third. If you think about the top 13 employers in Boston, top 13, exclusive of government, 11 come from the Eds and Meds institutions. And just in the past year, in the last 12 months, the Eds and Meds in Boston gained about 21,000 jobs. We're all really, really excited about GE coming. And they're promising about 800 jobs, I believe, if you read the Globe properly. 21,000 jobs just in the past year, right? Now, I mention all of this leading up to my first question for the following reason, right? Not to flatter our panel, right? But because, and I'll probably offend the city folks in the room, but because in this 300-page document, that is the draft document, it hardly mentions Eds and Meds. Now, it is just a draft document, so therefore we're going to take care of it after this evening, right? I did find on page 45, in a section called Productive Economy, of course, this is certainly part of it, the following sentence: Boston economy has grown on the strength of its small businesses, true, and vibrant healthcare, education, and finance sectors, which is also true. But that's not all it says. So, I know that I'm supposed to ask you about what you can do for Boston, and better than you have been doing. But the first question will be the opposite in a way. I would like each of you to say something about what you expect from the Boston 2030 process relative to your institutions. And any of you can start, or I can point to one of you. What does your institution expect from the Boston 2030 process?
Well, I would like to mention that we have a building coming up, so we're hoping that we're going to get an approval to move forward. I think that's the most urgent for us. But certainly, I think support of helping us create a pipeline to bring more Boston Public School students to our higher education institutions. We have very active programs, RAMP program, where we bring students in the summer to spend a couple of months studying, doing different hands-on projects, getting ready for the college environment, and we actually also pay them while they are working with us, or rather staying with us, because we know that they have to work otherwise to support either themselves and their families. We also give special grants for students who are coming from Boston Public Schools, and certainly through this program support students so that their retention rates after the first to second year are actually higher than the average for the overall student body, and also the graduation rates higher. So what we would like to do is really establish a better collaboration with different high schools and even middle schools, and really educate students about STEM careers and making sure that they understand that that's a good path to take, but they also have to get prepared properly in the high school. And of course, we want to work with the community colleges who are here. So support of the city for that, and I think recognizing again the importance of higher education and the institutions that not only provide that a very important well-educated workforce that attracts companies like GE, but also that we really are the engine of the economic growth of the city. And we have, for example, at Wentworth, a very strong construction management program. So basically, the whole Boston was built by our graduates. So again, recognizing that a relationship and working closely with the city, I think, is extremely important to strengthen the pipeline to STEM education.
That's great. So not everyone, please say you want your projects approved. Dr. Brown.
I will resist that temptation. But what I'd like to take is a very long view, because I think when you do a plan such as the 2030 plan, you're trying to envision the city over a long time scale. And as a major private research university with a very residential footprint in the heart of Boston, we want Boston to thrive. We believe, and I sincerely believe personally, Boston has gone a long way down the path of transforming its economy into a 21st century economy. And it needs
partially through all of the eds and meds, by the way. Yes.
Well, and in the private sector, in the life science sector, is now starting to percolate into high-end manufacturing, in the retail sector, in the digital economy. All of these pieces are here in Boston. And what we have to do as a city to thrive, and if the city thrives, we will thrive, is continue that transformation, allowing it to be a mecca for people who want to work and live and play in that environment. And we count on the city. Yes, I'd love my permits approved very quickly, but more than that, we count on them for great education, great transportation, great urban planning, all of the things that a city has to do to become that center for these activities. And if that happens, we do fine, because we supply people educated into that environment. They want to stay. They want to come to Boston to study and learn in that environment. And we will thrive if Boston continues to do those things. And so I think the planning exercise, the 2030 planning exercise, and envisioning how the city continues down that path over a long time scale is critical to us.
You know, obviously all of us are commonwealths of learning, and our focus is teaching and research and service to the institutions over which we reside, as well as service to the community. But we're also all urban colleges in varying degrees. Emerson sits really in the heart of downtown Boston. It has been a pioneer that has transformed that corridor of the downtown in very profound ways. There are those of us of a certain age who can remember the combat zone.
Not as a user, obviously, just as an observer.
Yes, so we passed by and see it. But along Washington Street now, there are 7,000 residential units that were not there 15 years ago. They were not even there 10 years ago. 4,000 of those units have been built in the last 2.5 years. So that speaks to the vitality of colleges and universities to invigorate, to animate, to create a sense of place that where citizens of the city and visitors can thrive and engage in Boston in ways that they might not otherwise. So we have that value among all the other values of research, teaching, and so on, and the economic values. So I think what you're likely to hear is that the overarching need or desire would be for us to be in full partnership with the city in a very profoundly strategic way around issues, around problems. I think it is still the case that the nation looks to colleges and universities to solve its most pressing problems, and we do that very well. And so to the degree that we can be in full partnership with the city on its strategic objectives going forward, then I think we all benefit. Now, having said that, I must say, speaking from Emerson's perspective, we have been really in league in a wonderful way with the city. We received enormous support from the mayor's office, and we've developed a number of partnerships that have been that will have a profound impact on the city. Most recently, Emerson bringing the Ambassador Theater Group, the largest theater company in the world, to Boston, sitting at the center of the Boston border, will have an enormous impact on the city and the visitors who come. So, I think the general answer is to be in partnership whenever we can, and not oppositional.
Yes.
Look, first I have to echo what my colleagues have said. The process of planning is very important to the work that we do in community colleges, because we're always responding with curriculum, and so even the areas of the plan that don't particularly address education are still informative to the programs that we provide. As community colleges, we have a unique situation where well over 90% of the students at Roxbury Community College are community members, and they're going to remain community members. And so when you start to talk about the economic development and opportunities for Boston Public School students to be able to continue their education, it's often community colleges that allow students, especially students of color, to get access to higher education. And so it's very heartening when the mayor has a program like free tuition that enables more students to enter the educational pipeline. It certainly has to be a continued partnership because our funding comes from the state. And so I might put a plug in for the city considering the fact that because the product that we're giving adds to the economic development of the city, that the support sometimes might need to be financial beyond scholarships in order for us to develop the types of programs that are responsive to the employers here in the Boston area. So I think that, again, partnership is vital. Continued work together and recognition, I think, is also important because, as a community college in this kind of competitive environment, it's often lost that there's a part of the population that is not going to have access to higher ed unless community colleges are supported.
Right.
I think Valerie is absolutely right. Annually, I have about 20,000 students going through my college, and you must have somewhere around 6,000 or 7,000. That's a lot of people, and we know that once they go through the community college, when they enter, they're at the two lowest quintile of income. colleges, their income rises at least 2 quintile, and that's huge. So as we talk about 2030, we talk about arts and architecture and all those wonderful things that make life reasonable and livable in the city. You're really talking about 27,000 students at our colleges. So if you have a conversation about arts in the city, and you're not talking to the community colleges, who exactly is that conversation about art or music or the liberal arts touching? So a lot of times community colleges are seen as sort of the engines of economic development because of the workforce. But I would suggest to you there's a flip side to that. You don't want 27,000 residents of Boston going home at night to think about only working the next day. I think the cultural life, the literary life, and the artistic life of the students at the community colleges are just as important for the vibrancy of the city as it is about them being just the workforce. So I get really passionate about the division between universities that are excellent out there, setting the standards for arts and culture and research, and then there are the community colleges generating the new workforce. And I would suggest to you, it's the same population at different points of growth. So as we talk about education and the place of us in the life of the city, we're way more intertwined rather than in a linear sort of progression, right? And then also in progressions of values, and seriously, in progressions of our moral life. I think those are really important questions to consider. And the other is, I don't want to think about the education system as K-12, 2 years of community college and 4 years of university. I really want to see that as K-16, so that we have a continuous conversation about the growth of a citizenry. That should be at the basis of Boston. So, okay, I'll go.
Well, let me follow up. I sort of had prepared an individual question, but obviously your responses will make me adjust my thinking a little bit. Let me follow up a little bit and get a little more specific with regards to Bunker Hill. At the moment, you're sort of full to the gills. You have courses going till midnight.
We're going on to the second fish. There's no, beyond the gills.
Beyond the gills. And so there's an issue of expansion that you're facing somehow, or the need, not the need to expand. You're also in an area of the city that I think the plan is identified as a growth area. And of course, you're also a little bit isolated. That is, you're on the Orange Line, but you're sort of not quite in Charlestown and not quite in Cambridge and so forth. So there's an opportunity to create a community around you. But say a bit more about what sort of neighbors you would like to have. If you think ahead a decade from now, given that growth will continue, that we all of you said about making a better city, you don't have a city around you quite yet. What kind of city would you like to have around you? What kind of neighbors would you like to have and encourage the city to provide for you?
In a very simple way, I would love to have a city around me that has teachers and learners.
Which means schools or housing or
No, I think it's more than that.
Yeah.
I think there needs to be a certain kind of inclusion, actually every kind of inclusion, where you have folks from different walks of life, either learning about the other's life or teaching about their own life. It should be a community that where members have something to learn from one another. But whether it is a different lifestyle or a different economic level, and that they can coexist, right? It's a city that is not just for the rich, or a city that's been gentrified. It's not a city that is only for the working class, where you will never step foot in if you were within a certain income level. And I see that now. I mean, I was here 10 years ago, left for a little while, and came back. We've gotten better in terms of that kind of diversity, but we're nowhere close to the kind of inclusion that we should have. So I would love to have affordable housing around me, so my students can live in that housing when they graduate.
Yeah.
I would love to have market rate housing, where I know that will attract a different kind of cultural life that will never come to be real, a working neighborhood. So in order to get that kind of vibrancy, you really need both, and maybe we can intentionally craft that.
Yeah. Could I ask you, Dr. Pettis? You're almost the opposite at the moment. you are even more embedded in a microcosm of Boston than Dr. Pelton. You have the MFA there, you have the LMA there, you have public housing there, you have the colleges of the Fenway there, of which you are part. So how do you stay a good neighbor? How do you stay a good neighbor? You really are embedded in not the center of Boston, but in the kind of the diversity of Boston.
Well, I would say we are located in the best part of Boston. Certainly surrounded by Mission Hill, Roxbury Community College, within the walking distance pretty much, schools around us. And we certainly thrive from that kind of collaboration where our students, for example, can go to the MFA across the street, or they can go to the neighborhoods and do projects for the neighborhood communities. And really enjoy doing service for somebody that they know and who's going to benefit just around the corner from us. So I think it's a wonderful community, and certainly has changed over the years and became a beautiful and much safer neighborhood than it used to be. And just working with all kids from different schools and bringing the diversity to the campus is very important to us. So I think we really enjoy being there, and more importantly, our students are attracted to Wentworth because what we call ideal location, besides having great curricula and having excellent co-op program and other opportunities, they have a chance to actually experience the whole city in a very friendly environment. I was actually visiting this summer some of our alumni in Miami, and one of them said he was talking with a graduate in his company from the Miami University, and was asked, what football team did you have? And he said, the Patriots. And the guy said again, but did your school have it? He said, no, we did not have to have it because we have the Patriots. So the students really feel that the whole city is their campus, and that they can really enjoy and get integrated within the community. So I think it's a wonderful place we are.
But there must be occasionally a friction that takes place amongst all of this very diverse constituents right there. So how do you minimize that? I mean, I had some role in Northeastern, who's not represented in master plan, and boy, the community is pretty upset at that. We have been pretty upset at them about housing and students' misbehavior and so forth. So how do you avoid all of that?
Well, if you asked our neighbors, they're going to say they're not Northeastern. We have much better relationship there.
You're well behaved.
Definitely, we have great relationship with the community, and they have supported us through many projects that we have done over the years. We certainly added also 1,000 beds so that we can take our students from the surrounding areas and bring them on our campus. So I have to tell you, we have excellent relationship with the community. I wish we had some members here to verify that.
To concur with you, yes.
Thank you.
So, Dr. Pelton, staying just with the issue of being embedded in an urban environment, obviously all 5 of your schools are. You've made a particularly strong commitment to the kind of the place-making qualities of the downtown area. You've actually, I think, inspired Suffolk to start doing some similar things along their little section of Washington Street and so Tremont Street. Why is this so important to your institution, on the one hand, and on the other, in case there are a couple of skeptics in the room, how do you continue to keep contributing without dominating a part of the city?
Well, as I said before, or implied before, just as the city animates us, we animate the city. And we have students who come to Emerson precisely because they want to be in a lively, vital, urban area. And they make this selection. They have, other possibilities, but they would. Oh, my voice. But it's they want to come to Emerson precisely for those reasons. We are in the busiest part of the city. downtown crossing has, I mean, that is the busiest T-stop in the city. On the corner of Boylston and Tremont is also enormously busy, perhaps busier than any other part of downtown. We have the best front lawn in the country with the Boston
For sure.
Common, which is every day full of vitality and diversity of people from all sorts of social standing. So we are very much a part of the city. We have made an enormous investment in that part of the city in the last 20 years, and in the last 7 years we've invested, or will have invested, about $400 million. We're a small college. We have a big impact. We own 3 theaters in that area, and with the partnership that we have with the Ambassador Theater Group, I'd be so bold as to say that we recentered the theater district to the middle of our campus, because that's going to be an enormous addition. So it's important, obviously important for us to create a sense of space, a place. I think there's a lot of work that still needs to be done along that Boylston-Tremont corridor. It should look more like Boylston Street near Copley Square than it does now. And we'll be working very hard for the next 3 years, maybe perhaps 4 years, to create a real sense of place, to have a destination there, to have retail space along Boylston that will be fully integrated into our campus. And so that when you walk on Boylston with the common to your, Boston Common to your left shoulder, that you will know that you're in this incredibly vital area.
How do you hope to grow further in that area? How do you hope to grow in that area?
That's a great question. About 19 months into the job as president, I woke up with a start at 3 o'clock in the morning, and I realized that I was no longer a college president. I was a real estate developer. and so that's how I spend a lot of my time. And in a way, speaking quite candidly, Emerson is a victim of its own success. So it did something that I was never to do in my lifetime, which was to sell high and buy low. When it moved from the Back Bay.
That's the first thing you learn as a developer, by the way.
Yes, I know, exactly. But the problem is that expansion for us becomes very difficult because of the market is really overheated, I know, as all of my colleagues would say. And so we're looking to expand in other ways. We're making a $300 million investment right now with a new residence hall, a renovation of another residence hall. We'll add 33% more students to our campus than we previously had, and we'll free up about 700 beds for middle and low income families to live in Boston. But the question of how we expand is a complex one, and it may mean that our expansion will have to include places other than where we presently are because of the real estate prices.
So, unlike you, Dr. Brown, you are sitting next to hundreds of acres of space, but unfortunately belongs to another institution that will go nameless at the moment. So, Beacon Yards is certainly one of the most amazing long-term growth areas for Boston, especially given the change in the turnpike and the evacuation by the railroads. So, Dr. Brown, tell us a little bit more about your negotiations with Harvard.
I'm going to back up and get to that
Please.
delicately. when you, and I'll talk specifically about the Charles River campus, not the medical campus.
Yeah.
We have two
Yes.
campuses, so I want to make sure everyone realizes that. You know, our Charles River campus is one of the most interesting and unique campuses any university has. Right? I remember the time walking down the campus, which I do every day, and saying to myself, you know, we should change the colors of the university from red and white and green to green and white so it matches our trolley line, right? And so we have, you know, the green line running down the center of Commonwealth Avenue, which marks the center of our campus. And so it's a very non-traditional campus. It's not as urban as Lee's or as urban as Columbia's or NYU's because it is more contiguous. It is more identifiable today as Boston University, but it's the longest linear campus anyone has ever seen, stretching from Kenmore Square down almost to Packard's Corner, down Comm Ave. And it's very narrow. And for those of you who know our campus, we interface with some wonderful neighborhoods. Back Bay at the east end behind Kenmore Square, to the Cottage Farm area in Brookline, over behind some of our facilities that are actually physically in Brookline, and stretching down more and more west of the BU Bridge.
Yes.
When we think about our campus, and we've been very public about this over the last 10 years, we think about it evolving over time to stretch over that distance, with the real opportunities for growth for us being west of the BU Bridge. And if you drive the Turnpike, you see our high-rise residences that have been built there over the last, literally about the last 12 years around the Agganis Arena and our fitness and recreation center. We built a large student community there with athletic facilities, but we see that area also becoming more and more mainstream in our academic environment. So I'm getting to your question because that starts stretching down behind the rail yard, which is the border of the Beacon Yards, which, as you said, is owned by Harvard. Harvard has acquired that all the way up to Western Avenue, which is a magnificent, huge piece of property. I think that there's enough property there for development in the city over decades.
Yeah.
This is not a short-term issue. And the most important thing for us is, at this point, is that the transportation that's laid out, that includes the recentering of the Turnpike, the West Station location, and the north-south connectors in the road system and bike system and pedestrian right-of-ways, walkovers, work for our campus and start activating that property on the other side. Because that property on the other side, which is now, for those of you who know the area, is where basically the turnstiles are.
Right.
The toll booths used to be on the Turnpike, is going to be an incredibly interesting area to create a unique mixed-use environment.
Absolutely.
Between retail, maybe some academic uses, but also residential. And if, from our perspective, the most important thing that happens is that develops in that way, in that there's access for us to develop that, not as an institutional residential community, but as a residential community where our faculty and staff and graduate students and possibly undergraduates see that as a resource, and that there's connectivity back to our property. Right now, I'd say in the next 5 years, that's the most important element. And when I say 5 years, what time scale is that? The time scale for deciding how the Turnpike's going to be recentered, and how West Station's going to develop, and how the street access is going to work north-south. Now, we have a vested interest in that in development. We also have a vested interest in it in protecting our campus, right? Because we have, as we said, a very narrow, very small physical campus, and that happens to be the area that is the deepest part of our campus. It's actually 2 blocks deep, which is 1 block deeper than any place else. And so it has a campus pedestrian feel that we have to protect in the sense of how the north-south traffic works over time. You and I are old enough to know that the impulse is to think that these things are going to be decided on a short time scale. And the truth is, they're very long-term projects. And it's about getting the directions right for all institutions so they evolve correctly. And I think we're off to a great start with that.
So can I push you just a little bit
Sure.
further before turning to you?
Yeah.
From a planner standpoint, independent of concern about BU or Harvard for that matter, from a planner standpoint, there's a very big gap there in terms of crossing the river between Western Avenue and the BU Bridge. And so if I was the mayor, and happily I'm not, I would have an interest in trying to overcome that in some way. Whereas if I was either Harvard, I'd be concerned about that. If I was BU, I'd be concerned about more bridges or roads that would kind of interfere with my particular environment. So it's a kind of classic, I think, conundrum between perhaps the needs of the city overall and the particular needs of an institution like yours. So say a little bit more about how that might be evolved over the next generation, as you said.
I personally think that the pedestrian transportation issue, what I'll call the north-south pedestrian transportation.
Right, that's what we're talking about. Right,
which is coming from LMA or Commonwealth Avenue and getting over to wherever you want to go, Memorial Drive or the Turnpike,
right,
etc., is the key to this. In that what we have to do is find solutions. And I think there are solutions. We've spent a lot of time and energy on this that work for the institutions and will enliven that area and make the commutes feasible. The commutes are never going to be wonderful, because even if we do the world's best job outlining how to get across that vacant area, you still have Comm Ave, you still have Brookline, and you still have the slog to LMA on the other side. But I think we can find solutions, and it's using the right streets, laying out those streets, and whether or not there's another bridge is a really interesting issue, right, in our future. We don't build bridges easily in Massachusetts, right? But whether that's needed, I think, is a question that will be answered over the next 5 to 10 years. The first thing is just to enliven the area with a road grid, and that's where West Station and these north-south connectors come in.
I'm sure you'd all agree we build great intellectual bridges, just not physical bridges, maybe. So, Dr. Roberts, you had already, just to follow up on what you began to say, I mean, Roxbury has a particular sort of mission to provide opportunities for Boston citizens and to actually prepare them for the workforce. So say a bit more about how you are doing that and what else needs to kind of expand or contract in order to do it more effectively, because that really is the essence, one of the essences of your particular institution, right?
Right, and so again, I'm going to echo what Pam said, that there's not as big of a division as one might think about when you start to talk about job preparation and liberal arts and sciences. So our part of our mission is the first 2 years of college, and the other is preparation for jobs. And so typically, what our goal has been is to look at the existing curriculum to see the extent to which a student can pursue either goal. Because my belief is that students oftentimes enter with one goal, and then very quickly they enter the world of work, or they enter a 4-year school, and those goals change. So we want the classes to be interchangeable. We want them to apply to 4-year degrees, but we also want them to be relevant to employers. The way that we've been able to do that is really we have some very active advisory boards where individuals who are working within the fields work with our faculty to make sure that the curriculum remains relevant. We also have a number of partnerships with 4-year schools so that, again, we're working directly with our colleagues in 4-year institutions to make sure that all of our programs are transferable. Even to the extent that we started some programs with dual admissions programs, so that in our nursing program, for example, we've aligned our curriculum in nursing so that a student is accepted simultaneously at UMass Boston as they are at Roxbury Community College. And so that's a tremendous boon for students. And it's also, again, added insurance that those students are going to finish their program with skills that are relevant to the workforce. So we have our associate's degrees, and then we also have a number of short-term training programs that, again, have really been designed with employers in mind. And so, for example, I know most Bostonians are familiar with the program Europe that Gerald Tertavian founded here about 15 years ago. Well, that's a program that really helps people to get acclimated to the whole world of work, in addition to learning the skills. So this March we started a cohort of students in Europe. In our case, they're studying sales that could be retail sales, but it could also be real estate sales in a very generic sense. And so that program gives us an opportunity to learn from what's been learned in Europe, which really supports a cohort model where students are traveling through the curriculum together. It also supports a real strong partnership with business partners who, again, are providing students, providing us, first of all, the guidance in terms of the curriculum, but it's also providing students opportunities for internships so that they're getting the real experience. And again, one of the things that our partnership does is then allows the students to simultaneously earn college credit that can be applied towards an associate's degree in business management. So those are some of the things that we're doing to really ensure that our programs are relevant. The last thing I'll add is that we're undergoing extensive remodeling, which allows us to really make sure that students and faculty have access to cutting-edge instructional materials, that our students are not getting shortchanged by starting at a community college, that our labs are modeled after our colleagues' labs. We're even renovating our theater space so that if they end up at Emerson, then they've got that experience within a professional theater. So all of those things I think are important.
In the way that you mentioned that there's collaboration, let's say, between the two of you or with UMass Boston, fantasize a bit about how much more interaction could there be amongst institutions. When a city has the benefit of 35, they all kind of take space. They all kind of replicate certain numbers of things too. So while it's an enormously beneficial to the city of Boston that there's so many colleges and universities here, it also, of course, occasionally pressures emerge as a consequence of that. Like on September 1st, when you can't get anywhere in town as the students come in. So, but apart from that little problem, one day a year problem, can you all sort of imagine greater collaborations between each of your institutions, or even those that are not represented in the room, in terms of sharing curricula, facilities, professorships? I don't know. It's a kind of a broader question about the future of education, especially since at the moment we're probably seeing a little bit of a gap in the undergraduate enrollment. Thank God for the largesse of China and other parts of the world outside the borders. But so, is the future of education going to be more about interaction, as there are inside each university in terms of its departments and so forth?
Well, first of all, I think what is not easily recognized is that there already is an enormous amount of collaboration between our institutions.
And many people may not understand that, actually, so yes.
Well, they are. I mean, and I know Brown can speak to this. I mean, the sort of research collaboration with a number of other research universities takes place. We have relationships with Roxbury and other colleges. So I think it already does happen to a certain degree. I think speaking of our own situation, brought up sort of the constraints on our real estate, and we really are constrained. There might be possibilities. We've had these conversations before; they haven't gotten very far, unfortunately, with Suffolk University about sharing facilities and other kinds of resources. Although I must say that we all, to varying degrees, share in a lot of what you would call backroom kinds of administrative services. There are several of these groups that yoke together, administrative services for a variety of colleges, large and small. So that certainly takes place. But I think there is, as you are suggesting, there is probably much more that we can do and could do.
Yeah, please.
Yeah. A couple of comments on that. It's a really good question, Alice. When you think about it, I think about it in different ways we could collaborate. If you look at administrative services, purchasing, as Lee said, there's a really robust consortium in the Boston area that does a lot of procurement in the name of many, many institutions, which allows us to procure things at scale that we couldn't do otherwise. And that's extending now into insurance services and other things that are actually adding great benefit to all of our institutions equally. And it's really wonderful to see, because the leadership of some of the large institutions in driving this. That happens relatively naturally today, and it comes out of the linkages between the leadership on the administrative side of the universities that drive it. The facilities issue is a little more complicated, because except in cases where you're relatively co-located, you have the hardship of moving back and forth. We have that just between trying to co-utilize facilities between our medical campus and our Charles River campus among ourselves. The other thing that's true, and I think this is true of most of our institutions, we only actually add space out of desperation, in the sense of that the space we add, for the most part, is close to 100% utilized the day it goes into service. And it would be a whole different planning process, which would take a level of trust and work between institutions to plan space that was going to be co-used, right? And it has not happened. On the research side is probably where in Boston, and I have to say the greater Charles River Basin, since some of the institutions are in Cambridge,
Sure,
right?
of course, right.
There's a tremendous amount of collaboration between facilities and infrastructure, and I would say discussions about who is actually the lead institutions in different areas. A great example of this, where the state of Massachusetts did wonderful things, and this goes back now 8 years, I believe, is what's called the Green High Performance Computing Center, which is actually in Holyoke, Massachusetts. And it was a consortium driven by MIT, Harvard, BU, UMass, and Northeastern joined at the end of this, for 5 institutions to relocate most of their computing power, which is an enormous amount of computers, to a facility in Holyoke, Massachusetts, where we could get much cheaper electricity and water, and actually build a facility at a fraction of the cost of it would have cost to build in Boston. And all of these institutions were adding computer space kind of continuously, which, if you think about it from a human perspective, building rooms for racks of computers in high-cost real estate that we have is really a bad use of our resources. And that was a case where everyone came together. The state of Massachusetts economic development part really helped in terms of incentivizing us to do that. It's been a tremendous success. And now there's other institutions that have computers out at this facility. I have to admit, and it's an important thing to say, it's totally pre-competitive, right? Is that it's the people who use the computers that do the great science, not the computers. right? So it was something the institutions could easily get around doing because it was pre-competitive, right? And remember that from a research perspective, we are competing for the same federal dollars and corporate dollars to support our research, and that's the challenge.
You know, I think the other thing I would say is that just the other constraint is that we are in the people business. And what I mean by that, we provide a service. We're service providers. And if you look at the the operating budgets of most of our institutions, 2/3 or more of that budget is labor. And so sharing the labor becomes, I think, a little more difficult kind of situation. But I would also say that, sort of building on your question, is this country is about to enter into the first big wave of consolidation in higher education.
Sure.
And it's happened here in the city, and there will be more consolidation, especially among small colleges with volatile enrollments, small endowments, and so on. And so you're gonna see a lot of M&A activity across the nation. You're already seeing some, but I think it's going to be more vigorous over the next decade or two.
I would just like to talk a little bit about the Colleges of the Fenway Consortium because it really serves as a blueprint for collaboration among institutions. We have in the consortium Wentworth, Simmons, Emmanuel, Mass College of Art, Mass College of Pharmacy, and Willock. And we work on different levels. The first one is the academic level, where the students can cross-register for up to 2 courses in another college without paying extra. And I have to say our students are the ones who really benefit taking courses in languages or humanities and so on. Then we have the collaboration among the faculty, joint projects, joint programs. We also work in terms of the space. And we share some of the facilities. For example, Wentworth has a fitness center where the other schools can use. Wentworth donated about 8,000 square feet of space for the Mass College of Arts and Design residence hall, half of their footprint, and now we have a joint health center there. And certainly have intramural sports and other activities. So that's the second level. And then the third level is what President Brown was talking about, really looking at the business contracts and working together to have the strength of the numbers and those savings that we can push back in and make sure that the access to this higher education is affordable to students. So I think that we just celebrated actually 20 years of the Colleges of the Fenway. It's been working very well. And I think the institutions, as the environment is becoming more and more challenging, will have to work like that together and to continue even more so.
I think for RCC, again, because of our location and the facilities that we have, we end up being a broad partner, not only with the institutions of higher ed, but with all phases of the city. So because of the Reggie Lewis Center that seats over 4,000 people, and right there across from the Roxbury Crossing Orange Line, we must have a good 15, 20 events each week where individuals are using it either for the sports facility or everything from vegetarian fair to job fairs and opportunities for people to gather in community groups. So we consider part of our mission civic engagement, and our theater is often used for discussion groups and again, as a resource to the community and certainly in partnership with other universities in the area. So we're in a unique situation where we really have planned our facilities to incorporate partnerships from the very beginning. Even within our new renovations, we will have a space that seats about 400 people that can be used as, again, educational spaces that we can use for contract training, but we can also use for a variety of community events and opportunities to partner with others.
So I suspect we will shortly turn to the audience to get your input. But one more maybe. I'm being handled from the front. One more sort of question that relates both to the first question I asked about what do you expect from 2030, but maybe has to do with interaction. What can you all better collectively advocate for? Is there an opportunity to advocate as a group more on behalf of cities, equality, resilience? Is there a way that you can act more in concert on behalf of issues that are of importance, either locally or broadly?
I would say, Alex, there are many places that we interface with the city, between education, infrastructure building, and economic development. But the one thing that if I was going to just pick one to advocate for now is to work with the institutions to talk about resiliency planning for the city, right? Is that, especially when you're talking about a long-range plan that stretch over decades, that we have an opportunity because of, I think, the planning that has gone on in Boston, and we have the challenge, given where we are relative to sea level, that we are going to have to really think very carefully and quickly about new construction, about renovations of building, what our resiliency standards are going to be relative to flooding, etc. And that the institutions who are here forever, right, we're not going to pick up and move inland, right, are the best partners in that discussion. And you and I at the sidebar before, I think that one of the places that the city is going to end up having to figure out how to trade off is height versus resiliency. In that, for buildings, is that in these large institutional buildings, the building standards have driven us underground. They've been to our advantage to go underground and not up. And if you think about the future, it has to reverse. We have to have incentives and a culture of going higher, not bigger, not at the expense of green space, not at the expense of the cityscape, but figuring out how to balance that resiliency of new construction and renovation going forward. And that's a place where it really is the institutions are best positioned to talk to the city, because we're not developers. We're not going to flip our buildings and walk away.
Go ahead.
I was going to introduce, in that same way, something that's unique, I think, to higher education and education in general. It is something that we have the innate capability and it's in our mission to do that I think is important to Boston. And that is the issue of race and ethnicity and gentrification. If we're going to do all of this building, right, and we're going to be displacing something. And in the course of doing all of that building, what's at the center of it for me as a student, but for the city, it's got to be the citizen. And let's acknowledge the fact that the mayor had a really good conversation on race and ethnicity, and it's really the first conversation. And as educational institutions, we should be wrapped tightly in that. We are the places. We're the marketplace of ideas. We're the place where we can have that kind of dialogue, and maybe if we try really hard, contain the explosiveness of it. I don't even want to say the word. And really get maybe some conversations of reason. Without that narrative to be clear in the city, any kind of building, any kind of adding on to the infrastructure of the city is going to be difficult. Who's the closest to the harbor? Who's going to be flooded out first? Who's going to have the ability to withstand, to have the resilience if they didn't have the dollars? I mean, how do we protect our most vulnerable and keep them in Boston? And I think that's a really, really difficult question that we have not grappled with in a very effective way as higher education institutions.
Well, first of all, buildings are not about bricks and mortar, they're about people. So when I talk about building, it's not about building for the sake of building, it's about creating community, doing exactly what you said. I think there are a number of us, a number of institutions that are very much committed to being very much engaged and involved in enhancing diversity, making it visible, whether it's Arts Emerson or whether it's how we use our theaters and open them up to various places, how we connect with various high schools, whether it's East Boston or Cristo Rey, Charter School, the Renaissance. I mean, I think we all do that sort of stuff, and I think that we can be a partner with the city, and I think the city is. The city would welcome our partnership and our more vigorous involvement. If you're going to ask me the one thing that I want would be this: if BU can have a bridge, and Boston College can have a T-stop, and Northeastern can have a T-stop, then Emerson needs a T-stop. We're right on the corner of Boylston and
You have
Tremont,
one.
and so
You have
what's
one.
that?
You have one.
No, it's called Boylston. It's not called Emerson.
I see.
Fortunately, we have 2 T-stops and a
You
bridge.
have two, yeah. So I'm feeling very left out.
Renaming things costs a lot of money these days.
I know that. But listen, I'm old enough to remember when the street going in off of the Harvard Bridge into Harvard Square was called Boylston Street, and it became John F. Kennedy Street. So these things can in fact happen with a bit of will and some money, of course.
So should we turn to the audience? Oh, sorry, yeah.
I was just going to add, in terms of advocacy, one is jointly supporting students from Boston Public Schools and K through 12 private schools to have a clear pathway, but also not forgetting about the significant retraining needs that our citizens are going to need over time.
So actually, before we turn, just one more question about the relationship to Boston, to the city, as the entire planning apparatus needs to change, partially, not least because of resilience issues and climate change issues. Do any of you have any suggestions? And this might be too boring for the audience, so I apologize. How you might adapt the IMP process that you all have to go through? Is it working well? Is it cumbersome? Should it happen more often, less often? Should there be more or less interaction with the neighborhoods? It should be a neighborhood IMP, not an institutional IMP. A few words about that before we turn to the The IMP, yes, is an institutional master plan which the city requires of each of its nonprofit institutions, and it's an attempt it's a sort of mandate to have each institution project its needs over the course of, say, a decade, so that the city has some sense about where each institution is heading relative to the others and the rest of the city's needs.
I will speak to this in kind of as we are the grandfather of institutional master plans. I believe we had the first one, which was done voluntarily in 1986, I believe, and have had one since that point. And I believe, having gone through this process once in my tenure as president, that it's a very, very useful process because it's laid out in a way that through the university and our government relations and our community groups that we work with, it lays the course of having discussions with each of the communities around us about how we're thinking about the institution going forward at the focal point of the discussion. And then the institutional master plan gets down to some very important issues about green space, transportation, use of resources, and how your campus is going to develop going forward. And for those of you who haven't read one of these things, it then talks about master plans for buildings and construction on your campus over a decade time frame, which everyone then comments on, and you reach a common agreement between the communities and the city government about that things are approved inside your master plan, which gives you a planning horizon. Doesn't approve the architecture of a project, it doesn't approve the project specifically, but gives you a planning horizon that the institution can work in. And so I think it's actually a model for how you do these things. I actually think a decade is about right. That anything that you plan longer than a decade will age poorly. Anything shorter than a decade would take too much work. So your question.
They are cumbersome in a way, but
It is not a cumbersome. I said it's an involved process, right? Because you involve all of your community stakeholders in that process. But it's a good touch point for people to know where you are, how you're planning relate to the community.
I would like to say that, again, that it is a very important process because it really helps the institution integrate itself within the community and the community in the institution. All that said, of course, there might be some streamlining that could be done, but it's really good to be able to plan with the neighboring communities and those who we really can impact in many ways how to move forward, and gives us a really sense of community and sense of working together and being able to provide the resources to the community beyond what we would normally do just for ourselves. So I think it is a very important process. Again, as I said, could be some maybe streamlining that we can look into, but overall it's very important for the community.
I would agree with a single exception. And I think it is useful for all the reasons that have been articulated. However, I do believe, as a matter of common sense, fairness, that exceptions ought to be made to projects, or there ought to be some way to classify projects within the institutional plan as substantial and those that are not substantial. And those that are not substantial, in my view, should not have to go through the same intensive community scrutiny that you would go under.
Question is, who determines substantial or not?
I would be happy to work with anybody to figure that out. But I would say that, speaking on our campus, that building a 18-story dormitory with 375 students is very different than saying that we want to locate our students on a temporary basis in a already a piece of property that's off campus that already houses individuals. Those are two very different projects. And I believe, and I think Joyce knows that I believe this, that the latter project should not require the same approval process as a substantial building project within that. So I would be happy to sit down with anybody and figure out the criteria by which we would judge certain projects as substantive and others as less so, and requiring a different kind of process. Other than that, I don't have any problems with the process. I think, as Bob says, and it's been said, I think it's a terrific, useful.
It's almost unique around the country, and I would say there's a lot of interest in this elsewhere. There's a fear of getting embroiled, but from my standpoint, as a planner who's done some of these things, I think it actually does a lot more good than harm. Yeah. So I think it's time, since you've been very patiently sitting. There are a couple of folks with microphones, I believe. So let's get a couple of issues not yet addressed. Sir, yes, right there. Yeah.
For the last 8 years, I've been publishing a weekly that looks at what's happening in colleges and universities in the community about energy and other things, other being whatever I'm interested in. As you say, 54 colleges and universities in the Boston area. On my website, I have 57 with links to their public events pages. And I never publish anything that is university only. I think we're missing a really useful tool. All of your institutions invite people in, have public events every day. But the public basically does not know about them. It would be very simple for the city or the state or the universities themselves to have a keyword-coded listing of all the events available. I know that the physics community in Boston has a mailing list that goes out, so physics lecturers across the universities are known to all the physicists. But to have these events, which are open to the public, so that the public knows about them, so that they're online and you can say, oh, there's a concert in the Newman Conservatory or Berkeley, or there's a lecture by Michael Collins, as there was at MIT today, the new astronaut. All of these issues are there, and I think it's really useful to invite the community in to do that. And it's really basically very trivial to do that now. You can ask Code for Boston or Data Science for Social Good to help you program this kind of stuff. Please think about this. 54 colleges and universities, events every day. The public is invited, but the public doesn't know. We can make it much easier for the public to know about it. Think of the boom for the innovation. Think about the boom for the economy. Think about the boom for the education. From high school students to elders like myself, people who still want to keep on learning. So I offer that to you as a suggestion. I do it. Fred Hapgood, a science journalist, has another slice. We can talk to you about how to make this happen, so please consider it.
Thank you. If I may say, it actually raises a very important issue. I'm not sure everyone wants to know about the hundreds of activities that happen in every institution. There are hundreds that happen in every institution, not much as, but it does suggest that as much as universities and colleges are a part of the community, there still is a kind of a gap of some kind. The level of citizens being able to approach these institutions may still need to be enlarged. That's actually, I think, the basis of the question. So a couple of comments would be great before we turn to another question. Yeah. Unless you just all nod and agree, and then we can go on.
I believe it's a wonderful comment, and we do a lot of advertising and publication inside our community.
Yes.
For our alumni, because we have a very large alumni group in Boston. But you're absolutely right, thinking, as you talk, is that in this digital age, a broader mailing list or a broader website that integrated this together is a great idea.
Yeah. Yes, the center, and then maybe we can get two questions up at the same time and get a few more people involved, right? Yes.
I have a question specifically for Dr. Ettinger and Dr. Robeson around the community college students. We know both from the research and then, if you're like me, graduate of a community college in California, as well as anybody working in them, that the academic success of most community college students is highly dependent on non-academic factors. And so I was wondering if you could share some of what you would love to receive, what kinds of support do your students need that the city or the larger Boston community, the nonprofit community, the private sector, for-profit private sector, could provide on the non-academic needs that could support the academic success?
Sure. So I think that this is applying to both of us, and we'll bounce off of each other, but we certainly agree, couldn't agree with you more. And as a matter of fact, at RCC, we started a program called Project Access, which is really the connection point between the students and the community, so that we can provide a bridge to services. So just for example, Casa Merida comes in and provides legal assistance to students. The Boston Public Housing Authority comes in and provides counseling for students that might lose their housing. We have some access to people that provide free babysitting and food pantries and tax assistance. So the list is endless, and I think that as much as we're able to provide, there's much more need that we're not able to address. And so we're always looking for the interface between our college and community organizations within Boston. People have been very supportive, but again, there's an endless need for services.
And I think one of the most powerful intersections of segments around Boston is with the nonprofit and foundations and the K-12 and the community colleges. One of the things that we realize is that coaching, in traditional sense, folks will call it advising, academic advising, but we're seeing it farther than that, right? That transition point from 12th grade to a community college or a four-year college is the most vulnerable time. So the Boston Foundation got a grant, a Social Innovation Fund grant from the federal government that supports 9 nonprofits in the Boston area to coach for that transition period to the 2-year colleges, both Valerie's and mine, and some for you too as well. So every student coming to us graduating from BPS has a coach for 2 years. That is going to keep them, and that's going to have to complete. The other is what Valerie said about the other needs beyond tuition and fees. When we say free college, sometimes we don't think about the fact that they still have kids to support. 3 out of 5 of our students are parents. We don't think about the hunger, the transportation, and the homelessness that goes on. 14% of my students are homeless. 45% of them are food insecure. So last Friday, we hosted 150 colleges and representatives from colleges and universities across Massachusetts to talk about hunger on our campuses. I don't know why we have to sort of talk about that, because there's free lunch in 12th grade and the grades before, and all of a sudden they graduate and they become not hungry anymore somehow. But that's what keeps our students from completing. But those things never get much play because it's not, it's not sexy. It's not the kind of things that you want to talk about in education. It's not the research. It's not the world-renowned 52 colleges around the greater Boston area. But those are the things that's going to make 20,000 students here, 6,000 students there finish. So thank you for that question. I think it's a really important one.
First, yes, go ahead, and then you, sir.
Sure. I've heard you talk quite a bit about expansions and also about providing pipelines to education for BPS students. So one thing that I'd love to hear about a bit is the role that the pilot program can play in the future of Boston as a way to end the chronic underfunding of BPS and avoid future school closures and provide quality access to education for all K through 12 students. I know this only applies to a couple of you in a direct way, and I know that EU last year paid the highest percentage of the requested amount at 80%, but I'm just curious if that's something that you're thinking about and if you're working towards moving closer to 100% of that requested amount. Oh, go ahead. Do you want me to just say what pilot?
Well,
I think
pilot.
I heard it.
Go ahead. Yes, go ahead. Yes. The pilot is a sort of payment in lieu of taxes. Most of these institutions are nonprofit, therefore they are not subject to the normal tax basis, but there's an expectation that they contribute something. And of course, the negotiation around that becomes very complicated, obviously. Yes.
Well, it's a wonderful question. And so I think it is important to step back and think about pilot in the greater context of what the institutions do, because, and the pilot program does that. It allows you to put your propose what they ask you to pay in terms of pilot payment in the context of everything you do. So if you look at Boston University and its role within the Boston public school systems, one of the things that's always been part of our involvement in Boston, and it's very much part of the discussion with the city about our contributions, are the programs we have for educating Boston public school students within Boston University. That goes back to the early 70s when we put in what was then called the Boston Scholars Program. It's now called the Thomas Menino Scholars Program, where we offer full merit scholarships to Boston public school students at Boston University. We also put in place, I guess it's about 6 years ago, another program which I'm really enthusiastic about, which we call the Boston Service Scholars, where we meet full need without loan for every BPS student that gains admission to the university. And that gives us access to a much larger pool of students from BPS. And you might remember that last fall we expanded this program to transfer students who originated from BPS, which is a very important pathway for your two schools into Boston University. And the city takes that into account when they're talking about what your, quote, payment in lieu of taxes would be. I actually sat as on the committee, when was it, 5-6 years ago, looking at designing the pilot program, and this was from the late Mayor Tom Menino. And I was very in favor of a program that's fair to all institutions. We have traditionally made, and I won't talk about it as a percentage of the request, I'll talk about it just in magnitude. It's the largest payment of a university to the city, and it's in a little over $6 million last year. The discussion about how that money is used, whether it's focused on the school system or focused on some other priorities of city government, we're not privy to that. So it's not earmarked money for any specific use. That's something that the city decides. I think, you know, the whole question about us going to 100% also is a comparison to other institutions. I think one of the things that we have the best pilot program of any city in the country, but it is still not even in the sense of people's participation in it. And that's something that, you know, I've spoken about before. I'd love to see our other institutions in the city step up and get somewhere close to us in terms of the participation in the program. And, you know, I would hope that the 2030 report would ask that as well.
I want to also to address that because we work together in developing the pilot program. So besides just giving the cash amount, there are a lot of other services that the institutions do. Just like Boston University, we provide a lot of scholarships to the students from Boston Public Schools. We take care of a public park in front of our dorm. We have a Center for Community Learning and Partnership where we provide various activities to the community members. Also have after-school programs, dual enrollment, and so on. So all of that comes as a part of the pilot contribution. But as President Brown said, not all institutions are at the same level. So it certainly needs some more work, but I think we are doing much better than many of the other cities.
Yes, and I think one of the things that maybe is not, you've both said it, one of the things that's not understood is that there's payment in lieu of taxes and there's payment in lieu of money.
Yes.
There's the service component.
Yes, the
Yes,
service
yes.
components, right, yes. But now, if I ask, but you feel that those who pay less money don't compensate in some way for in terms of their service component? How is that actually sort of measured, or, yeah?
Well, every institution has to submit a yearly
Yes.
report in these different categories, how much money has been given directly toward the pilot program and how much was in these different services. And some of the institutions, when you add up all of that, they contribute their part, and some maybe don't do enough in cash, or maybe do not do enough in services.
I think the gentleman there, and then you.
I am an avid participant in Boston University's Evergreen program, which allows older people like me to audit classes together with the younger students at a nominal fee. I must have taken about 10 classes. And I think it's a wonderful way of having older people interact with the younger students. The class discussions are enriched, I think, on both parts tremendously by allowing that. Some academic institutions around the country have gone further in working with real estate developers to develop retirement communities on or near university or college's campus, and allowing the older folks not only to audit classes, but to encourage them to volunteer on campus, be mentors. You know, if you were a retired banker, you help students find jobs in the financial industry using their networks of contacts. They allow them, encourage them to socialize with faculty and staff. Maybe the retirement community's dining room acts as the faculty club for the academic institution. Most of these, as I understand it, have been developed not in urban areas, and I think one of the reasons is that you just don't have land on your campuses. But it seems to me, you know, one idea for some collaborative activity amongst academic institutions would be to work with the developer to find various parcels of land around the city where people like me, you know, who might want to move from the suburbs or down into the city, would move into a retirement community that is based as a consortium of various academic institutions in the Boston area. So the retirees could take classes, audit classes at any of your institutions, and maybe we'll all funnel your older alumni into these projects. And of course, some of the economic benefit would go to the university, and some goes to the developer. With the developer, you know, paying all the capital expenses, but the universities and colleges, you're providing the programs and access to your facilities. So that would just be an idea that's real estate related and may have some economic benefit to the institutions as well, not lots of non-economic benefits.
Anyone want to respond to that? I would say, I think you are right in that most times it happens when there's no city around. There's a city here. So in fact, well, other than affordability, which perhaps you're trying to get at, I mean, you are welcome to live next to any of these universities if you can find proper housing. Right? That's what cities are about, right?
And the difference is what people really like existing communities like college campuses is being part of the community and lifelong learning.
Yes, yes.
And you don't have that when you're just in your own apartment or condo.
Yes, yes. Yeah. But that's maybe part of what part of this issue about whether there could be additional collaboration, because you can be a lifetime learner in Boston with 54 different education institutions, in theory. Dr. Ryan, did you want to say something?
Just, I would respond, and you know, it's a wonderful idea, and I have watched one of these projects, I won't say it, but in another institution, take an agonizingly long time to work.
Yes.
And the problem is real estate prices,
Yeah.
right? Because at the end of the day, it is a commercial development. It cannot be part of the institution as a not-for-profit institution dedicated to the mission we're dedicated to. And so you have to figure out a way to do it where it's a commercial development in association close enough to the institution or multiple institutions to get exactly what you're saying, that sense of community, right? And make it commercially viable. And the other institution I know that worked on this struggled for years and years to get that last piece. I'll go back to the question Alex asked me early on. This would be a wonderful component to throw in to when you're thinking of the residential community that's going to be built in the Beacon Yards area. Right? Because you can be there and be walked to either Harvard or BU and a quick stop to MIT. And the question is, and you have the rest of the town there as well. And it would be a wonderful community because it would be built around a lot of academics, undergraduate, graduate students, staff, and faculty who are working at these institutions, which I think is the part you're looking for.
Yeah, when I was dean at Dartmouth College, we in fact had one of these programs, and in fact, we had less of a barrier than you would have in the city because there was a lot of green space. The economics of it, the commercial economics of it, worked out in a way that might work here, but it would be, I think, more complicated, and given current real estate prices, it might be difficult.
Sir. Sorry. Yeah. Sorry.
That's okay. I would like to see.
This way, you're in the dark. So.
That's okay. I would like to see, or if there's a policy in place where you start a project and don't move on to the next project until that project has been paid for in the IMP. I'm not going to name any major Massachusetts institutions, but is that what happened in that case? That they just kept making more projects without bringing in the students? And do you understand what I mean? Like,
are you referring to?
Is there a policy in place in the IMP that prevents universities from using tax dollars from wasting funds to prevent you from moving on to a project without finishing that project and that building until you've paid for that project, either with students' enrollment and having to move on to the next project is what I'm trying to say. Is there any, Dr. Brown, is there anything in the...
I think you're trying to make a distinction between public universities and private.
Yes.
Okay.
And so for private universities, we do not receive any public subsidies from the state. And so I think that's a question for the public universities, but for BU, Emerson, and Whitworth, we're all private, so we don't receive public funding.
Go with what Lee just said, is that our trustees do not approve a project that we can't pay for. So there is a business model behind every project we build that's in the IMP. And so in some cases, if it's a student housing project, in many cases that student housing project, especially in our history, has been about housing more of our students on campus and less in the community, and we've counted on that. We have a big project underway right now, which is a fascinating project. People have seen it. It's the restoration of Miles Standish Hall, which is at the corner of Bay State Road in Beacon Street. Built in 1925, it's historically marked. It was a Suites Hotel during Prohibition, has a wonderful history I won't share with you. And it's being remodeled. On the outside, and when we get finished, it'll look just like it did in 1925 because it's historically marked. On the inside, it'll be a modern suites residence for 700 students. That project has no new revenue associated with it because we had 700 students in it before. We'll have 700 students in it when we finish. So it had to be paid for by saving money from operations over a number of years. But our trustees don't approve a project unless we have a funding source for it. So, and we don't get state money for it, so it's all done internally.
Let me just make another comment on the private schools. There is always a business plan, and you either base that on the enrollment growth or you base on some of other fundraising, but really you don't get anything from taxpayers. So you have to have funding coming some way, and it has to be, of course, approved by the board.
You know, I don't think any one of us who are in our CEO seats or in our trustee seats would ever approve a project not understanding where the revenue is coming from or where the students are coming. And I have to believe, because we do it this way, that when you do the planning, that's why it's called planning. Sometimes plans fall through. And one of the really difficult things that's happening across the nation in Massachusetts right now is the funding of public higher education. We're dependent on how the economy is doing from year to year. We're dependent on a number of different factors where we probably haven't had increases in our budgets for the last 5-6 years. So if you make a plan to build a building 6 years ago and you're promised a certain source of revenue, that does not mean that source of revenue is going to be unwavering. It's going to be depending on the economy. Part of the juggling work that we do as public university and college presidents is to do that juggle. And sometimes that juggle, you're juggling with nothing. So God forbid something happens with a project that's unexpected. It's going to change the course of that project. So yeah, I think a policy of not finishing one, not doing another one until you finish one is, this building is great. But buildings usually take, sometimes 2 or 3 years from beginning to finish. So how long does it take to build a campus? And by the time you build a campus, is your plan really going to work?
And there are also concurrent needs on any campus as well. But I would, if you're referring to the problem that's been in the paper lately, that's a very, very complicated set of issues that are not simply related to a funding source. We would have to spend another couple of hours to try to unpack that, or days actually. I would say in some ways, at least from my observation as someone who serves, it's actually harder to raise money in the public than it is in the private sector, because...
That's what you think.
What's that? I'm told that we're sort of out of time, so we all need to kind of get on with our lives. So last question here, and then we'll conclude the session. And perhaps people will be able to stay for a few more minutes if somebody wants to come up to the floor and ask. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So this question is more like for Dr. Brown or Dr. Pelton, because BU and Emerson College is a global known college. So, which means you never lack student enrollment or applications. So I'm wondering, if the institution has the plan or projection about student population, because in Boston there are about 35 higher education institutions, which has like 80,000 or 90,000 people, and if you include a visiting scholar, it's even more than 100,000, and that's about more than 10% of city population, and so which means this is a large impact. And also in Boston rental market, the Boston rental market only has 2% vacancy rate. This is the lowest rate compared to other cities, even lower than San Francisco. And I think students has played a large role in that. If you do have a projection about how many future students will come, or you have do you have any incentives to house them in campus instead of put them in the city and pressure the city's rental market?
Can I say, first of all, part of the IMP process is precisely dealing with establishing the student population in any universities. It's not something that can be done kind of willy-nilly on the part of any of these institutions. And secondly, there have been tens of thousands of student housing built in Boston in the last 50 years. It's never going to be enough, but it's certainly a heck of a lot more than most people think that has been done. Anyway, yes?
It's a great question, and every institution has its own answer. So I I don't speak for a set of institutions. Boston University today, and I'll speak mainly about undergraduate education,
Right.
but we can talk about graduate as well, has a really global reputation. This last year we had 61,000 applications for 3,400 slots in our freshman class. And you ask, that's an opportunity for growth. And if you ask at the same time, if you look at Boston University's incoming freshman class, it has decreased from 4,300 in 2005 to 3,400 today. So we're actually going in the opposite direction because we're trying to increase the quality and impact of the educational experience we give. And we feel that we've been able to make the dollars work with a smaller freshman class. And we're housing more students on campus today as a fraction of that student body than we ever have. But going to Alex's comment, when you go through the 10-year IMP process, a big part of that is talking about the population, your student population and your staff population, the parking spaces you need for your staff, and how all that impacts the city. And so within that context, the IMP then talks about your plans for either taking housing offline or building more housing, etc. One of the things you have to understand from a university perspective, especially with advanced undergraduates and especially graduate students, is the graduate students are part of our adult population, right? And they will choose to live in the environment they want to live. And they're very different than how you think about housing freshmen on the other side. So we have spent more time in our housing system over the last decade, 15 years, changing the type of housing we have to apartments and suites in away from what many of us went to school in, the double-loaded single corridor with bathroom down the hall, which is unappealing to upper-class undergraduates and totally unappealing to graduate students. And so that transformation is going on at these institutions. But at the end, it's a market. At the end, when we go to build the next dormitory, and we have one more residence in our master plan, the discussion has to be inside our student body and ourselves is, will they come if we build it? Because going back to the previous question, we can't build it unless we have an operating model so that we can pay for it on the other side. And that has to do with the demand in the system. You're absolutely right about the percentage vacancy in the rental market driving it. But you also have to look at, when you look at our graduate student population, and we look at this carefully, where they live, they don't necessarily live in Boston. They don't necessarily live that close to campus. So they actually have a much larger catchment than the undergraduate student population.
I think that we have to bring this to a close, as any good thing has to be brought to a close.
There's a young woman up here who is dutifully had her hand up.
All right. We'll make an exception.
I think she should get one more crack.
Very good. Okay. I'm sorry I missed you. Right. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity. My name is Nahdab Iskandar. I'm an international student from Saudi Arabia and doing my doctorate in Northeastern. And I call Boston home for the eds, and I called Chicago home before for my master's. So my question is to the panel: what kind of services would you suggest the city would include specifically for international students who come here for higher education and would go home and say, here is the Boston way, and maybe experience a nice kind of a collaboration with different countries and this nice sense of the city. Thank you.
I'm sorry. Could you repeat the question? Did anyone really understand? Couldn't quite understand.
Sure. So, from your experience, what can be proposed as a service provided by the city specifically for international students?
How to make international students more, I suppose, welcome. Yes.
By the city.
Yes, you said by the city. We have a wonderful international student body, as does Northeastern. And I truly believe that Boston is one of the great places in the country and in the world to be an international student. I do worry very much about what's going on in the country relative to visas, relative to long-term employment possibilities in this country, and the general receptivity we have as being part of the world. With that said, I do think that it falls mainly on the institutions, right, to help guide students, whether they be international students, domestic students, undergraduate students, graduate students, in terms of navigating issues that they might have. And the international student body has a lot of anxiety and concern about possibilities for jobs in this country, H-1B visas, etc. I don't think about that as a city issue. I mean, personally, I think that is institutional. And my personal experience, and obviously I'm not an international student. I came from Texas, which is a fairly foreign place in New England, right? But what I find this community at large to be as welcoming to international students as any place I've ever lived in my life. The question would be, are students talking to the institutions and getting the services they feel they need to both feel comfortable here and take the next step in their career?
I agree with that. It really comes to the institutions, and we certainly have, as every other institution, I'm sure, a special advisor for international students, trying to integrate them, of course, with the rest of the students, but also we have, and I'm sure again the other institutions have that, special societies for international students. We do have actually organization for students from Saudi Arabia, and we have an international day where the students bring their own food and show pictures of their country, talk about their experiences. I think it's very inclusive. And again, I also came from Texas. I was in San Antonio. And this is a very multicultural city, and I think it's welcoming to everybody. So my advice to the international students is to talk to their international advisor or their faculty, try to engage in different societies, maybe from their own country, but also to try to intermingle with the other societies, professional societies, and then search also organizations within the city. I know that there is a very active society of, again, students from Saudi Arabia within the city. So I think this is a very multicultural city. You just need to ask, your advisor, your faculty, and so on, to get engaged in different ways. But I think all our institutions have that kind of infrastructure on their campuses.
And I would agree, at least from my perspective as a parent, although I'm not foreign, that most institutions, I think, try to take as good care or provide as many opportunities. Not that this is very important, but related, my son just graduated from Northeastern. I attended the ceremony. They have a perhaps you do that too, Professor Brown, but at one point all of them have their little flag, and at one point everyone raised their flag. And there was something like 130 countries represented. And it was a very heartwarming experience, both for us locals as well as I think everyone else in the room. So I would agree with you, Professor Brown. Boston probably does as good a job as any, not that it can't be improved, to welcome and embrace students from around the world. We do have to stop. I think a very good round of applause for the panel. I think we should have more of these because I think that the amount of connectivity between our institutions and the citizens of Boston continue to be improved for the benefit of both. Thank you all for coming as well. If a couple of folks can stay for a minute, if you have a pressing question that we didn't get to answer, perhaps we will stay for a few minutes.